I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing New York illegal immigration, the assault of police officers, and classified documents. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Now that I'm in a different environment, much better.
I see. Have you seen them borders?
I have. Shut it down is what Arizona says.
They need to shut that stuff down. And it was just brought to my attention. We've known, as we've talked about, that they are using cartels. But how does somebody say, I don't know, from China, know who to talk to in a Mexican cartel to get them across the border?
I would probably believe that someone like the UN, or there used to be an organization that actually used to help people during times of crises, be the Red Cross.
Yes, but they're supposed to help people legally if they help to set up, say, a refugee camp somewhere. If the country has turned into a war-torn nation, they might have a refugee camp in another country. So, for instance, Somalia has been war-torn, and there are refugee camps in Kenya, as an example. So, and then there are other governmental and non-governmental organizations that help to get people to those refugee camps, or sometimes they're able to get themselves to those camps and then report in. But one of the ways that the cartels are marketing themselves is via TikTok.
Ooh,
and
TikTok.
they are doing it in the Chinese language because they're speaking Chinese, and that is their target audience. So on TikTok, there are videos showing individuals how to get out of China, how to get to Mexico, once in Mexico, who to contact, where exactly to walk across the border, where there's a specific hole in the fence, or really the fence doesn't meet the terrain quite well, and where to cross around the fence, how far in to go, and then how to turn themselves over to Border Patrol should they wish to present themselves for a case of asylum. Now, what's interesting to me is you could actually go get in line at the border and present yourself to Border Patrol as you cross, but going in a non-site facility, they might have better luck of being allowed to keep going.
Well, are they trying to treat it or think it's like Cuba? If you touch soil,
you're in a better position.
You're in a better position
because you've never been admitted,
correct,
etc. So yes, there are TikToks in Chinese telling individuals from China how to illegally arrive into the United States.
Right. And I had also seen an article about the Red Cross. That's why I brought them up, that they were actually giving people maps as well and directions on how to get into the USA and what to do once they came across the border.
And in those instances, shouldn't they be, the people who have made the maps, shouldn't they be arrested for aiding and abetting illegal immigration?
100%. Just like these border crossers, illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them, that have ended up in New York recently and are now accosting or beating up police officers. And now you have the mayor wearing a bulletproof vest and what I saw on the news, a $600 tie. I don't know what the reference was or the inference was, but
he has money. So what? He's a moneyed person. So he can afford things. Technically, the taxpayers will pay his bulletproof vest and extra security. But we now have individuals, the mayor, Governor Hochul, who encouraged people to come unlawfully into the country and to go to New York because they were going to be a safe haven. And they are finding that they are indifferent towards people of the United
Go
States.
figure that a percentage of them are lawbreakers.
And they are lawbreakers. One of them was being arrested there in New York. And so the other ones that were nearby started assaulting the police officers to attempt to stop the arrest of one of their compatriots. These individuals were allowed out on no money bail after physically assaulting police officers. No money bail. And then apparently they used the identification of other illegal immigrants to get money and tickets to come to California.
Isn't that one of the DAs there that wants to prosecute Trump?
Yes. Letitia something or other is the attorney.
Yeah, she's the attorney general. He's the DA. Or it's flip-flop the other direction. But I know he was one that likes to badmouth.
Bragg is the Manhattan district attorney. Okay. And Letitia is the attorney general, because there was lots of comments about how often she was in court, which is very unusual for the attorney general. Usually they might package up a case, send it over to the DAs, and then they step out of it because they have other stuff to do instead of mean mug smile at the cameras for the court.
Well, it's because there's a bunch of folks there that are going after a guy that they don't like. So they're taking great pride in going to the courthouse and watching him potentially squirm and be found guilty on trumped up charges.
Trumped up charges. So speaking of not trumped up charges, the illegal immigrants who fled New York City after beating up 2 police officers are said to be using stolen phones to buy cars back in their home countries, to buy pools back in their home countries. We're talking Ecuador and Venezuela. So when you save your credit card information on your phone and they're able to access your phone after they steal it, they're using your information to then buy stuff back in their home countries. And these illegal immigrants who are apparently now in California are a part of a wider conspiracy of stealing the phones to make lavish purchases back in their home country.
Let's see if I can't process this thought to you without botching the whole thing. So basically you have officials at the local level that think they're doing good by bringing all these people in and trying to help them out. And what do? They crap on America. Okay, some of them, a percentage, not all of them. And then you have leadership at the federal level who, number one, allow them in. Number two, think that countries like Iran, if we give them enough money, want to like us and play nice. And the common denominator between the two is what? These do-gooders are getting it wrong because these people do not like us. They don't want to be part of this country. They want to come in, pilfer, and run away. In countries outside of here, they want to kill, maim, and mutilate U.S. citizens. So what's the moral of the story? Shut the border down. Stop giving money to countries abroad that don't deserve it and will never like us no matter how much money we give.
You can't give enough money to make somebody like you enough. That's an abusive situation. Oh, if you give me more, maybe we'll talk good about you. And then more money given, more money given, more money given. Oh, now we're being attacked by hardware and programming, items that were programmed and constructed in Iran, missiles and the like. And we have just sending in their tech. And guess what? We die. And then if we don't die, because we had 3 service members who passed away, who were killed by Iran, essentially. Now we've had other attacks happen with these unmanned drones. So we now have more deaths linked to the retaliation that Biden has started. So something that we talked about, if we tit for tat, how is that going to escalate, de-escalate, what's going on? So we have some of our, some other individuals who have been a part of the help in trying to stop the Houthi, the help in trying to stop all of these individuals linked to Iran that have now died in a retaliatory attack.
Yes, yes, and yes.
So, I mean, our world's strongest president is out there right now. He gives a 20-minute speech, mostly incoherent, and then he's off to do another vacation or hideout. If you look at his agenda for the day, it's 10 a.m. get a briefing, 1 p.m. get a briefing, 4 p.m. off to Never Never Land. He does nothing.
5:30 p.m. ice cream. I like that part of it.
Yeah, 5:35 after the ice cream is eaten, get a sponge bath.
Off to the beach.
I
Well, this geopolitical thing and world we live in is quite interesting because it is a tit for tat. And we do have probably our own CIA and a couple of countries in the Middle East that don't like what's going on in Yemen. They would never admit it because they've been asked, but that's why they've hired mercenaries or hit squads to go over and kill Houthi leaders and others within the Yemeni government. Because if you follow the money and you follow the videos and the history, about 150 people of different sects over in Yemen have died the last 3 years. So that may be why they're angry at us, besides us backing Israel, that is their this for that. So is that a quid pro quo? Not in the literal sense.
Not in the literal sense, but it's retaliatory, and in some ways you're like, yeah, I can't blame them. I guess if we did go in trying to change your climate, trying to make sure that certain people aren't going to be in leadership positions anymore and others are hopefully that we like are going to take over those leadership positions. Who likes having someone in their country offed by a foreign government?
Absolutely. And that's pretty much like the movie we talked about on Friday of last week, is look at the movie Suriana with George Clooney and a king and his two sons, and one wants to do business with America, the other doesn't. The king dies. The one that doesn't is in charge now of the country, and he miraculously gets droned. And now the one that loves America and wants to do business in America is in charge.
Yeah, but if you find out that America kills your family, are you likely to stay friends with them? Unless, of course, you're like, hey, you took out my brother and I wanted to be leader anyway.
I didn't really like him that much anyway, so it's okay that we took him out. So it's just food for thought. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and I still back this country pretty much 100%. You know, there's reasons. I don't know if they're all correct or moral, but there's reasons that people do certain things. And I know right now that if I was in charge scenario for 1 week, it would be over. No, I wouldn't nuke everybody. I'm not into killing citizens and innocent women and children. But I would make all of one country's oil refineries go away and all of their infrastructure that makes them money.
And maybe when we freeze billions of dollars in their assets, we don't give it back since we know exactly where it's going to go.
Right. And see, that's where these guys think that if they do that, they're going to be friends with us.
Right. And absolutely. What has it gotten us? What is, I don't know, to your point of, oh, I'm not going to nuke them or I'm not going to kill innocent women and children. But people support Palestine, and Hamas did that. And yet you have a big support for Hamas. So if you're doing it to the right people, you could still end up with the support of your countrymen.
Well, see, I would end that too. I would end that as well, because I would go total black. And what I mean by total black, no news outlets anywhere in Israel or in the Gaza Strip. Zero. And we would finish the business at hand, and then we would open the country back up. And I guarantee you there would be new leadership in the Gaza Strip. Because what's the end game here? Are we going to do this for another We've talked about this. We're going to do it for another 500 years, another 1,000 years. Are we going to let your great grandkids have to deal with this? Or are we going to finally pull our heads proverbially out of the sand and correct it? Or is it not correctable? Does history and biblical times say this is not correctable in the manner with which I think it is?
We have always had warring tribes. So if you want to look at our country and other countries as warring tribes, some people just don't want you to exist.
Well, it's amazing how they've been here thousands of years, and we've only been here as a country
100.
couple hundred, and we're the big bully on the block right now.
That we are.
So then the big bully should really be the bully. Instead of giving them one black eye, give them two. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, well, our airstrikes in Iraq and in Syria to retaliate for a drone strike in Jordan. Eventually, we might get to where we are giving two black eyes because they responded to our response. So, depending on how big they keep going, we may end up in that position.
Correct. And this thing, like you and I have talked a few times, this thing may run until the November election. And if the right person gets put into that office, it will either end or it will accelerate. One of the two.
Yeah, but one thing that we can count on is more Biden lies between now and any other time he gives a speech. So as we noted, 3 service members unfortunately died in that attack in Jordan. And so Biden ends up calling the parents of one of the individuals who passed, 24-year-old specialist Kennedy Sanders. And he always has to turn a conversation about himself.
That's what narcissists and sociopaths do.
And so what did he do? Not only did he turn it about himself, saying, oh, my son served. Part of that sounds like he's trying to make a connection. Hey, you know, your child served, my son served. I understand what it's like to have a family who's in service, a child who's at the service of the country. But then he takes it one step further by again claiming that his son, Beau Biden, died in Iraq. And he's repeated this claim. His son died of glioblastoma, which is a brain tumor, 5 years after he served. Now, in some cases, he tries to say that it's because of the burn pits that his son got.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Got it?
Burn pits?
That he claims that, but so far I don't think that there's been a connection technically made there. But he claims that his son didn't die because of his service in Iraq. He claims that his son died in Iraq. So that would be a distinction. So this time you could technically say his words weren't exactly meant in that way. So my son spent a year in Iraq. That's how I lost him. So even though he's repeatedly claimed his son died in Iraq, now he could be laying claim, no, I didn't say he died in Iraq. He died because he went to Iraq.
Well, this old man is so used to plagiarizing and skirting around the real truth that I don't think he knows the difference between fact and fiction, honestly. And that may be a product now of his age and Alzheimer's or these aneurysms he had or brain misfunction, whatever. That's why everybody needs to wake up, even the people with a D after their name that are staunch Democrats. They need to push somebody else to run in his place. Because even if they don't want a Republican, we cannot have 4 more years of this.
No, we cannot. And if Michelle Obama's your person or if Gavin Newsom's your person, make them declare.
Yes, and I know it's basic when you look at the Constitution. You have to be 35 years old, United States citizen.
By birth.
By birth. You can be male or female and blah, 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 blah. However, there has to be a caveat and other qualifications there. Just because, like all the first ladies before her did a very good job at what they did as a presidential wife, she is not qualified to sit in the office of president, nor is Joe Biden. But, I mean,
that's a different reason,
yes,
yeah.
That's a different reason. She is not qualified.
I mean, based on that, I wouldn't be qualified to be president. But Queen, dictator, I'm there.
Well, she needs to
No.
she needs to do like Hillary, though. If she really wants to work her way up in office, she needs to run for Congress. She needs to run for Senate.
Hold a different office before
Holds
you.
some offices before she tries to go after the big prize. And then maybe once she gets some experience and she sees what geopolitics and everything's all about, not just from what her husband told her during the bedtime stories, but she really has a grasp on reality.
Okay,
Go ahead.
but hear me out. Hear me out. Do we really expect her to be the president, or is it really another Obama term? And
No,
by Obama, I mean male Obama term. That's what they've said about Biden.
It would be a fourth Obama term.
Right, because this is term number 3.
Yes.
It's not Joe Biden.
And
Joe Biden's running nothing.
And you see where we're going and where we've gone with this third term. These are some toxic times. You have a majority of the country that hates each other. We can't get along with other countries. We're going further in debt to give 2 warring nations money. We're helping another nation on the other side of the world with a conflict, which we have to help protect them. You have Taiwan about to get rolled by China. You have China, which has supposedly put a bunch of Trojan horses, and I don't mean horses you ride, software killing and hardware killing Trojans within our system here in America. So they're going to start wiping out our...
Yes, because over and over again, a little aside just to what Dirt Sailor Mark was just saying, over and over again, we would get the feds arresting a Chinese national or former Chinese national, as it were, who got a secret clearance, top secret clearance, got access to classified information and started copying it, putting it on thumb drives and spiriting it away to whomever, printing out pages, however they wanted to do it, however they were going to make their drop. They were taking the information and they were getting it back to China. And these would be individuals who became United States citizens most of the time. And then they would steal the information and send it back. And so they know our vulnerabilities. They know how to target us, where to target us. And they've been doing it for decades. And it is not racist or xenophobic to point out that there are individuals who are doing this. Does it make all individuals from China who come to the United States bad?
No.
No, it does not. But there is a history of it. And if you have over 1 billion people who live in China, you can afford to send some over, and as they get caught, somebody else is going to do it on behalf of China. They will. They have a nefarious purpose. They don't actually want to become U.S. citizens. They're doing it for access.
Yes, we do have a congressman by the name of Swalwell that actually was...
honey trapped
by a Chinese spy. And it happens within Russia. They say that they, being guys like Tucker Carlson, say that if you were to go to D.C. and just spend 4 or 5 months there and get to see the whole picture, you'd realize that that whole place is totally out of control. And that's why we need everything you and I have talked about. Term limits. We need to take the lobbying out of it, because talking about China, why would we allow China to donate money to a president's presidential library? They're not doing that for free.
No, or why would we allow a Chinese citizen to donate tens of thousands to a local school?
Yes, we need to...
What are they trying to do? And they have business ties back to China, where they're getting their money from, where they're sending it to, and who they're trying to sway.
Yes. And you look at China, it's just like a lot of other places, a lot of countries. Their citizens are really good people. Their country's beautiful because they have a lot of history and a lot of neat stuff, because they go back thousands of years. They've been around a long time. Yet you have a leadership group that gets in office and they took it by force, that does not want to give it up, and they are bad people.
Yes, and then they're willing to perpetuate that badness over and over again just to maintain their power, and they do things to also dominate globally. So there are many things that we have to watch out for. And our southern border is one of the big ones, but we also have a northern border that people come through. We can't put our head in the sand and just hope that everything turns out hunky-dory all the time. And now we have a Congress who's fighting with each other because instead of a one and done bill or single, only one subject bill, instead they want to add all their little earmarks in there, or we won't pass a border bill unless you give Ukraine more money. In a bill, they did the same thing with Israel. The money to help fund Israel had a Ukraine attachment to it.
Well, they are close. They're like right next door to each other.
Oh, yeah, they are. So these things are connected, and then we end up with corrupt politicians, or they get caught out for doing something. If they get honey trapped, now they have blackmail on these politicians, and then they can get them to do what they want over and over again. So we do have to be concerned, which is why term limits can only have so much blackmail, but when the person's out of there, they can't help you. We got to stop them from being able to have special access, which is lobbying. Everyone in America should have the same amount of access to their congressperson. No special lobbying, no special trips. And they say they don't take lobbyist money, but then you hear about the funding of a certain trip happening by a specific lobbying group. It all needs to stop.
Yes, and since we have all this great computer technology now, the congressmen and senators should stay home in their home districts. And if they need to meet with other congressmen and senators, they should do it weekly by Zoom. And we should pick 2 days a year, well, maybe every quarter. So let's say 4 times a year. They actually fly back to D.C., they meet, they decide on some things, and then they come back to their districts.
1 week for voting. It should be enough to get in there, vote on the things. There is nothing. Back up. They have made themselves so important, or they're self-important. They're important in their own head. They have made themselves so important that they make people think we can't live without them.
Right. They are legends in their own minds.
Yes. Being present all the time. No, you need to be present for your people. Zoom every meeting. And then the most important things will get voted on once a quarter.
Yes. And they would not need to buy houses back there. They would not need to live in apartments and condos that are paid for by lobbyists.
1 week hotel.
1 week hotel stay paid for by their constituents, by their funding, and they go back home. Kind of like the Texas legislature, I believe, does. If they can do it on a local level like that, they can do it on a state and a federal level.
Oh, right. They get, I think it's tens of thousands of dollars when they get elected to re-outfit an office to their liking. No, you're a government employee. You can have a standard issue desk. But if we went and did just what we had just said, or what Mark had just said, which is they get 1 week once a quarter, guess what? You don't have to pay for the office to get outfitted there in DC. Travel with go to the supply. You can have a supply office and they can go get pens and pencils if they need paper, whatever. Print something off. You can have a community printer. But you do not need to spend all of this money on them. And if they're flying back 4 times a year, pales in comparison to the costs they spend to keep 2 entire office and office staffs up and running.
So this kind of reminds me of a mayor we had here in Fresno years ago. I believe her name was Karen Humphrey, when they were looking at redoing City Hall. And it was a basic building that was remodelable, and they could have added floors onto it because it was designed originally to stack on top of it as the city grew. However, she not hooked up physically or emotionally, but business-wise with an architect that wanted to make a city hall that looked like a spaceship. So if you look at our city hall, it looks interesting inside. To me, it looks out of place outside. Until you look at the terminal at the Fresno Air Terminal, it looks like the twin sister of downtown City Hall. We didn't have the money at the time. And you still have now homeless, and I mean we've wrecked that thing. We've run that gamut, talking about homeless, talking about rents and stuff, to where they built a building that we shouldn't have built because we don't have the money.
And we're really good at wasting funds.
Yes.
If it came out of her own pocketbook, she would make different decisions. If you had to be financially, and we see that all the time. People making decisions off of taxpayer dollars, they make all kinds of decisions that they would not make at their own home if it came out of their own pocketbook.
Why do you think they created these laws at the state level and back east at the federal level that so you spend citizens millions and millions, if you make a mistake and it doesn't work out, you're not held liable. Oh, well, we'll just raise taxes, bring in more money, and we'll start another pet peeve project. First it's solar, and then it's wind, and then it's EVs, and then it's build a bridge in Nevada that goes nowhere. I mean, all these items and all this money we spend. Senator Rand Paul's the best at that. He brings up his list of all the wasted money the fraud and abuse.
Yes.
And we do nothing. He talks about it. Other senators laugh at him, and they move on and do it again.
Right. They just do it again the next year. Because what did Nancy Pelosi tell us all those years ago about passing a bill? We need to pass a bill so we can find out what's in it.
Absolutely. And I'll bet that she has run her entire organization like that the entire time she's been in office.
And that's how you get all these earmarks and all of these special pet projects and things that go on. They're not accountable for all of the wasted
That's how you get
funds.
Insider trading, and your husband's one of the best at stock
doing
trading.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, and what do we not do well? Things that we're tasked with doing. One of the things that Border Patrol didn't do well, and I'm not trying to knock Border Patrol on this one.
Yeah, your grandpa'd be angry.
But in March of 2023, there was an internal federal memo that said authorities caught a terrorist illegally crossing the southern border. Then shortly thereafter, they released him into the country where he stayed for before he was arrested. It was nearly a year. So what had happened was the terrorist screening center initially considered him a mismatch when they examined him and he came up on a watch list. Well, later on, it was determined in January when he was caught in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that in fact, he was not a mismatch. It was him. We don't give CBP long enough, and nor do we have enough bed space to fully vet everybody that comes in. Most of the people claiming asylum have no case for asylum. If they want to just, I know I've said it before, and I will say it again. If they want to have an economic migrant visa, then get an economic migrant visa. That is up to Congress to create a new set of laws for that. Stop calling economic migrants asylum seekers. They are not. But anyway, CBP has so many people coming in, so many people invited to illegally cross that they're trying to process millions upon millions of people. Instead of 50,000 a month, it's 300,000 a month or more. And they can't do it all. And so some of these names that come up on the terrorist screening, they don't have long enough to vet them. So you say, oh, it appears to be a mismatch. Well, if they lied about their name, if we didn't have their fingerprints on file, all these different variables that could happen, we end up in this situation. So this terrorist was in the country for a year, and this one was actually caught at the border and then subsequently released. So we don't know how many gotaways are inside the United States. And we even saw a video, as we mentioned a few weeks prior, of the gentleman who says, oh, you will know who I am soon enough. And he was also a terrorist, is a terrorist.
Well, they can't use the excuse now that they're not communicating with each other because after 9/11, we fixed that, right?
So after 9/11, back up, we fixed some of it. So it was under Clinton that they started saying that all of the different federal agencies couldn't talk to each other. And then after 9/11 happened, they said, oh, we made a mistake. So now we're going to allow the federal agencies to talk to each other, but there's still only agencies and under certain umbrellas with certain agreements are allowed to talk to each other. And then others are not. So for instance, if you're under the Department of Homeland Security, if you're under that umbrella, you can talk to each other. So CBP can talk to ICE, who can talk to USCIS, anyone under the DHS umbrella. But if you go over to the DOJ, that is, Department of Justice, is a different umbrella, even though they're feds. So we end up in this situation still where you have a hard time talking to each other. And in some cases, you have to request permission from the sometimes illegal immigrant to talk to the other agency.
And then poor guys and gals, they have antiquated phones and computer systems and software. So antiquated that it's easy to smash them with a hammer and break them. Oh, wait a minute. That was so long ago. That was Hillary and her group. Never mind.
Right.
I just
Bleach bit it.
Just having a little reflection on.
Yeah. So we just end up in this situation where we have these individuals who are coming in. CBP doesn't have enough time to vet them. Even if they have been vetted, they're given documents to travel based on the information they provided to Border Patrol, which is then allowing them to get onto an airplane because they're moving them around the country. They're housing them in Chicago. They're housing them at the airport before they get moved on to a different location. And they are allowing people on an airplane who are essentially unvetted, that the only name they have is the one they provided that we cannot verify even actually belongs to this person. And then we're allowing them on a plane. But you, sir, do you have your federally issued ID in which you went through all of this rigmarole to prove that you are who you say you are? Your federal ID compliant license? Because if not, we may not allow you on the plane.
So when the Bidens take over, the country is 50% lawless because basically half the country doesn't follow the rules.
It would appear so. Rules and laws be darned.
So January 6th in this silly insurrection, be darned. Why aren't we holding him accountable under some act that he is doing illegal things to the country?
Because he's of the right party, so it's okay. He's doing the bidding of the right party, so we aren't going to haul him in and question his illegal actions. I mean, we even have looked at Trump for his having of classified documents, and then we find out that Biden had them too, and then the former VP had them as well. And a different person investigates Biden and the former VP, Mike Pence, and we're not seeing prosecution for the very same thing that they are handed Trump an indictment for, that they decided to prosecute Trump for. We are not seeing it. So it's either illegal or it's not. And if you're not going to prosecute Biden, it just shows that you are allowed to essentially do illegal things because, hey, they wouldn't have started prosecuting him if it wasn't illegal, right? They wouldn't just go after people all willy-nilly like. So we have that. They've decided not to go after Biden. However, in this particular case of Donald Trump's federal trial on election interference, the case has dropped off of the court docket. So then people are like, oh, is this an accident? What's going on? Because the trial was set for March 4th. So apparently that one has been postponed indefinitely pending a decision on presidential immunity. So we now have this, and this is just this particular one. This is just the one that was supposed to start March 4th. We have 27,000 other trials. Is there an is? Does he have immunity? We're still going to wait and see. But they had to do a press release because they tried to silently just not say anything about it. And then people said, hey, why is this no longer on there? So we have to wait. And here's your Alvin Bragg has said the judge was waiting to see what happened in other jurisdictions for what's going on in New York. If they delay the March 4th, which it appears they're going to because they've pulled it off and it's an immunity claim, it could push other trials with Alvin Bragg into a possible wait situation.
Right, until after the election. Yes. So he needs to make sure he picks the right VP candidate?
Apparently. It's all over the place. So if he does have presidential immunity, I'm going to say that that's going to be Biden's claim for why they can't prosecute him.
Well, do they
for
lose
anything.
Do they lose their clearance after they leave the White House? Because
I'm sure they lose. I'm sure they do.
Well, they talked about those 50 former spies that signed that letter that said they were sure that Hillary stuff was fake news and it wasn't Russia collusion, but his definitely was. Come to find out there was no Russia collusion and there was a potential for them to lose their clearances. Well, if they still have clearances.
Because they were active. Some of the individuals that signed on.
Right, but a majority of them were not.
Were already retired.
Yes.
It depends. You can still have a clearance if you work in the private sector.
Correct.
But so when maybe I don't know. I definitely don't know what it's like to be president and then potentially do you keep your clearance? Do you lose it? I had my clearance downgraded as I was on my way out. They essentially canceled it as of the day that I left federal service. Now, obviously, there's knowledge in my brain about things that happened over time. I am not allowed to talk about those things. They are still considered classified. And I imagine the same would apply to the former president.
Right. And once he is the confirmed nominee, which will be after Super Tuesday.
After March 5th?
Yes. They will have to start reading him back into...
No.
I believe
no, not until he's elected.
No, I believe he starts getting...
He gets Secret Service protection because it's a safety issue, but he already gets it.
Because he also gets the morning briefings that the president gets. The elect for the party that's running against him will get to go or read in on those meetings as well. That way he doesn't, if he wins, does not step into the presidency totally empty-handed. That's why there was an issue during 2016 when they were hiding the briefings from him when they were not supposed to. I'm almost certain there is a clause there that whoever the nominee is gets to either read into the briefings, goes to the briefings, or...
I stand corrected. Why do presidential nominees receive classified briefings?
Yeah, they have that. Sorry, I couldn't come up with a technical term. It was slipping me, but it is a classified briefing. But they have to be read in. They can't go into the office if they win totally blind because then things happen.
Okay, so this is essentially the summary I will read on it. So I did not realize that, or if I had learned that in the past, I forgot. So my apologies. But as is customary for the official party nominees, so at the time you were talking about 2016, it would have been Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Obama was on his way out. He was two-termed. So he was on his way out. So it would be Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will be given the option to receive top secret national security briefings before they actually hold the election. So there is a long tradition that the intelligence community at the appropriate time, and as of this particular article, which was written in August of 2016, they said, and now is the appropriate time, since both candidates have been officially anointed. So that both camps will be reached out to and offered briefings, said the director of the National Intelligence, that was James Clapper at the time, who oversees and conducts the briefings. So it is the practice dated back to Harry S. Truman. On April 24th, 1945, just 12 days into his presidency, Truman learned that the U.S. was cultivating an explosive that potentially could destroy the world. And so at that time, when he was given the brief on the Manhattan Project explaining that Russia was on its way, blah, 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 it was then later in the summer of 1952 that Truman decided that the candidates in the year's election should be presented with the option of receiving the intelligence. There were so many things I did not know when I became president, and that was a quote from Truman.
100%.
So yes, I did not realize to the degree that they would be given briefings.
See, and that's why I say he has been president once before. He was not and is not termed out. He lost and he's running again. He should already actually be eligible to see the briefings by the sheer fact that he's a former president.
Wow.
Which means that he should have what? Presidential immunity. Because they're the ones that basically set the tone. They're the ones that can bomb a country into annihilation. They're the ones that can save a country. So they should have pretty much lifetime immunity because they know things. And that's what I had read once years ago, just to add a little caveat on there. That's why they have Secret Service protection. Not
for their lifetimes?
Not to save their lives in the event of someone trying to take it, but more for in the event that they lose it and start giving up secrets.
I see. That would make sense.
Yes, that they are watched and recorded at all times. And I could be wrong. If somebody in the Secret Service community or in the spook world knows, please
share.
Please share.
Please share. Well, it would
non-classified stuff, but please share.
It'd be really interesting to think about if they do keep it presidential immunity, if all of the people surrounding Trump have started saying that they'll flip on him to get a deal, because some have. They've flipped, they've cut a deal, and then they admitted their portion of the wrongdoing. But if he has presidential immunity, then scot-free, I suppose.
Well, see,
wipe your hands,
it is...
Even if other people flip on him.
Right, but it is their word against his, because their interpretation of what he may have said to them could be totally contrary to what he meant.
Right, and as we talked about last week, there is an individual who was sentenced to, I believe it was 4 months behind bars because he didn't heed a subpoena to come in front of Congress. He decided to say that that he thought that essentially the president saying not to do something, and then essentially the immunity would extend to all of them because the president said no. And he has been sentenced to prison. So it's going to be an interesting one to see what the court has to say, to see if it likely will go up to the Supreme Court too. So they're waiting on an appeals court, and then it will go up to the Supreme Court.
Right, it should be a clear victory with all justices siding with immunity, because if they walk this thing in the other direction, then from here on out, any president is susceptible to being sued, to go into jail for something that they shouldn't go to jail for. And the higher crimes and misdemeanors, they should go to jail for.
Not to continue beating the same drum, but if Biden can get looked at for things that he did before he became president, and they're willing to turn the blind eye to it, meaning having classified documents all over this country, unsecured, just sitting out by his car in the garage, whatever, but having it unsecured and having it across this country with who knows who has access to it. And they're so willing to say we're not prosecuting. If Hillary Clinton can destroy records and not get prosecuted, also not a president. And then we have an actual literal president even doing the same thing that the other did, which was having classified documents. If we're getting prosecuted for that, you're taking an actual president and prosecuting him when people with lesser abilities, not having
lesser immunity
or no immunity, and you're giving them what would essentially be qualified immunity because you're not going to prosecute them.
So before you continue,
let
me pose this question to you that I've asked you many times over the last year. Do you live in the greatest country on earth?
No, I do not. But I believe I live in a country with great potential.
Thank you. Has so much potential. But when you put flies in your soup, the soup doesn't taste very well.
No,
it's time to take a strainer and strain out the flies.
Absolutely. And we need to, as Trump said, we need to drain the swamp. I'm totally for draining the swamp because the swamp includes a lot of different people in a lot of different areas that should not be able to have their job, whether it's a congressperson or it's an FBI agent who has decided to go rogue, like the one who was going after Trump while allowing Biden to get away with thing after thing after thing. So just on the FBI violated hundreds of Americans' constitutional rights in a case in Beverly Hills. There was a raid on a company that had private security boxes for people. And people, different individuals, put in either money, maybe they didn't want to put it into a bank. So in these security boxes, they put in either money or family jewels or records or things like that.
I'm not putting my family jewels in any safe deposit box.
Yeah, they're in mom's purse.
Other than the one your mom has in her purse.
Right. So what they did is they went in to this particular company that was suspected of money laundering. They filed a document that basically said they were going to go through each safety deposit box so they can give a hand receipt for it, saying everything that was in there so they can hand it over to the person as they took control of this company while they were looking into whether or not they were involved in money laundering. But what they did instead was they cataloged the contents. There were 1,400 safe deposit boxes, and then without a criminal warrant started forfeiture proceedings on individuals who were not suspected of committing any crime. They were merely just a customer of this location. So the Ninth Circuit has ruled that these individuals had their rights violated because they were not suspected of doing anything. So technically, they shouldn't have even opened up the boxes of people that they didn't suspect of doing anything. It was the company. They tried to claim that they were just going to inventory so that way they can make sure they had a list of everything and they knew what to give back to which person.
I wonder why they felt they had to strong arm people like that. Which person in the office or district office said, nah, take it all.
Yeah, so it was considered an unreasonable search and an unreasonable seizure. And they started these forfeiture proceedings, and they are very technical. You can end up in a situation where if you don't file the right document at the right time, you end up forfeiting your property. Even if you've never done anything wrong, you're not suspected of doing anything wrong. They've done this to people when they've pulled them over, and they might have cash on them. Don't suspect them of doing anything wrong. They're not drug trafficking. They're not doing anything wrong. They could be moving from one state to another. They don't trust banks. They kept everything in cash. Moving from one location, get pulled over. They seize everything in the car, and then they start civil forfeiture on them.
They do that in Texas.
They do that in many different states.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know. That might be one of the states.
Yeah, so the FBI, in January of this year, the Ninth Circuit sided with the people that had their stuff seized. It reversed a 2022 lower court decision which sided with the FBI, and it now requires federal officials to destroy any inventory record of the box holders who have not been charged with a crime. They can't then use it to try and create a case later. They're being told they have to destroy. They didn't even have permission to do it in the first place.
So you would think they had a snitch inside, so they probably knew which safe deposit boxes had the criminal activity going through them. So they did this intentionally to try to generate a bunch of extra revenue or something.
Yes, because it was considered like a high-end vault. So they expect to have money and jewels and things in these vault locations. So imagine if they said, oh, one person at the safe deposit box at Chase Bank at this location is doing a bad thing, and instead they get to seize all safe deposit boxes and then start civil asset forfeiture on people.
Well, I have my safe deposit box buried in the Nevada desert. If someone would like the coordinates, I will give it to you. If you will send me a check, cashier's check for $1 million, payable to Dirt Sailor the Podcast at P.O. Box. Just kidding.
So I would like to add, though, the company which was being investigated. So the FBI raid on U.S. private vaults was part of an investigation into the company, which ultimately was shut down, and individuals pleaded guilty to conspiracy to launder drug money.
Hold that thought. I always have this question. Is it pleaded or pled? What's the proper use of the American
both.
Names? Okay.
Both actually.
So I always get those confused. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I believe both are technically correct. The government had argued before the Ninth Circuit that the warrant authorized the FBI to seize all the deposit boxes, inventory their contents, and that's their standardized policy. But inventory is not the same thing as we're going to seize it.
Well, it'd be neat if you could go online and see a list of all the things that the FBI has done nationwide over the years, just like when they accidentally do a raid on the wrong house and they bust people and they throw them in jail. They scare the bejesus out of old people, and then they don't apologize. They apologize, but not in true form. And they just say, too bad, so sad. It happens. Or a police department inadvertently goes into the wrong apartment and shoots somebody and kills them. And they say, sorry, wrong apartment.
Yep.
Our bad.
We made a mistake. And if they come to your house, they bust down your door, that's going to cause damage to the door. That's going to cause damage to the framing. That's going to cause, a lot of money to fix it, depending on if they busted out your windows to put the smoke canisters in there, whatever they did to get the person that they're looking for, even if it was the wrong address. Did you know that your homeowners won't cover it? And then also the police department won't pay for their mistake in many cases. So your homeowners won't cover it. You're out money because of somebody else making a mistake.
Right. And that's why I don't want to prosecute them or sue them or throw them in jail. I would just like to see a list so you can do a left side, right side scale just to see how many mistakes they've made over time. And I'm sure the police departments and the FBI, CIA, and that they do that. They police their own houses, so to speak, but it still continues to happen.
Yes. Something that came up, which was really interesting, I thought that the take on it was really interesting, is Gavin Newsom was apparently at a Target in Sacramento, and he witnessed a brazen theft. So he called it a brazen theft. And he asked the person who was checking him out why they were just allowing people to walk right out the front door. And I guess the checker didn't realize that it was Gavin Newsom, and said it's thanks to the governor's policies and laws that he's implemented. And so, so the why aren't you stopping him? Employee says because of the governor. And the governor lowered the thresholds, and there is no accountability. And that is something that the state did, and then the governor signed it into law, where instead of it being it was $450. Above that would be a felony, and below that's just considered petty theft. They raised it to $950, and oftentimes the police won't even come out for it. So why are you allowing it to happen? Well, because the police won't even do anything. You want a regular schmo, a security guard, who I don't even know if they get pepper spray.
Probably not, because the companies they work for are probably scared to get sued.
I'm sure. So the governor, I guess the person realized that this was the governor, looks twice, kind of does like a little freak out or whatever you want to call it. But he then asked for the manager, asked why this employee is blaming the governor, and then said, it's not true. We have the 10th toughest in America laws. He's talking about the laws. Look it up. I'm sorry. I've lived here long enough. You relaxed the laws. So was it number 1 and now we're number 10 on the toughest of laws? If I was going to say who has the tough law, I would say Florida, because they will arrest you for crimes. Tennessee, you won't get away with anything.
That's why some of the best DAs in California are always on talk radio talking about what a terrible governor he is and how he helped push a false narrative with these 2 bills that got passed that slacken the laws, let people out of prison. And you're right. You just nailed everything 100%. They don't prosecute. They let people go. Criminals can beat the you-know-what out of a law-abiding innocent citizen. If they try to defend themselves, they're the ones that are bad. They're the ones that are prosecuted. So This is what narcissists, or as a highly respected newscaster or commentator on a big news network said, this is how sociopaths act and respond. Okay, not my words, theirs.
Yeah, so the governor, additionally, why am I paying $380 when people can just walk out? Okay, then do it. You know the law, apparently, and you see that people aren't getting prosecuted. Wasn't he just the one that signed an additional law to help combat retail crime rings? And you're trying to say it doesn't happen? And why are they just allowing it to walk out? It's only the crime rings that they're going to prosecute. The one-offs, the people just walking in and walking out that aren't a part of a ring, technically wouldn't get prosecuted if they're not a part of the crime ring.
Correct.
Newsom's spokesperson tried to say that theft per capita in California is 17% lower than the average among states.
So if you tell police officers not to arrest people, do the numbers get fudged and they go down? That's how
it works.
Yes, that's how you make the numbers look good.
Because if you don't call the police, one, it's just happening. If you do call the police and they don't show up, they don't make an arrest, guess what? There's no numbers there to support that there is crime in that area. So if you don't report, hey, you have no crime. That's an amazing concept. Amazing concept. Don't report and you have no crime. That's just absolutely wonderful. And another thing that's wonderful is our job market under Biden. Bidenomics is really working, guys. I don't know if you know that. Super working. Working as well as our retail theft is. No, under Bidenomics, we're being told that we have so many jobs being created each month. Inflation is not going... Well, they say inflation is down, but all that means is inflation isn't rising as fast as it was before, because prices definitely don't go down. But they're telling us that we have more jobs, the economy's great, people have more paycheck, more bang for their buck. That's what Biden over and over is telling us, trying to sell Bidenomics. But the job market is so good that people keep getting laid off.
Especially in the IT world.
Thousands and thousands of layoffs, and it's still happening. In January, there was an announcement of more than 82,000 jobs cut. That's an increase from December, of course. So we're getting these job cuts, but don't worry, jobs are created. Oh, but don't worry, California is going to have a $20 an hour minimum wage if you flip burgers, flop Whoppers.
Does that make them a flopper?
A flopper?
Yes, and people are already angry at the fact that a McDonald's hamburger is going to be $18, and the CEO has come out and said, oh, calm down, we'll get the prices down and under control. No, what they're going to do is they're going to come up with robotic machines that they already have that are going to take control. Then they'll be able to wipe out half the workforce, and they can pay the additional employees at $20 an hour.
Yeah, you're going to have a manager managing equipment.
Yes.
It's just absolutely wonderful. So while we're still on the subject of Biden, this one isn't Bidenomics, but I don't know if you remember Tara Reid.
Yes.
She accused Biden of assaulting her.
Yes.
She has decided to sue the Department of Justice over alleged misconduct and infliction of emotional distress and anxiety. So a lawyer for Reid filed the tort claim seeking $10 million following what was described as an FBI operation that was conducted after she came forward with her accusation against Biden. And the claim from Reid is her Fourth Amendment right was violated, as well as violations in the FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and some state privacy laws. So included in the tort claim was a July 2020 grand jury subpoena issued to Twitter from the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of California, demanding all records pertaining to Reid's Twitter accounts. But July of 2020, Trump was still president. Let's be clear on that one. So the tort claim outlines several allegations against the FBI, which it's insisting it was behind suspicious occurrences like disruptions to her bank accounts, A manuscript of her book went missing in November of 2020, and it alleged further details against her claims against Biden. So she is claiming two-tier justice system and one that was designed to protect Joe Biden.
Absolutely.
It will be interesting to see what ultimately ends up happening with that court case. As sad as it is, because she actually has contemporaneous evidence to back her up, even though the Biden library is not the Biden library. It is Delaware gets his records as a senator, and there was a claim that some of the records would support her claims, and they refused to give up any of the records, saying that they're sealed for so many years.
Of course.
But there was other contemporaneous evidence that she presented, and that her mom actually called into a national television show talking about what had happened to her daughter and what she should do if she wanted to stay.
Just by his sheer mannerisms over the years, and you look at videos of him and the way he acts and the way he oodles people, you know he's got some guilt there.
So Fannie Willis has actually now admitted to the relationship with the prosecutor that she appointed. That she had a personal relationship.
She has a fourth accusation coming out against her. Number 4.
Oh, she does she?
She does.
But Nathan Wade actually settled part of his divorce case, so that way he didn't have to get deposed.
Oh, a fourth co-defendant, yes, in the Georgia case against Donald Trump, has filed a motion for the court to disqualify embattled District Attorney Fannie Willis. So if she wasn't a narcissist, she would what?
Step aside
and let Georgia make a decision as to whether they're going to continue with this or whether they're going to kill it, so to speak, in a proverbial sense, metaphorical sense, not a literal sense.
No, to kill the case.
Yes.
To can the case.
To can the case. To put it back in the can.
Okay, speaking of canning, different kind of canning, growing your own food. So what some individuals like to do is they like to grow their own food, and then they may can it so they can keep some of it longer and use those food items throughout the year, because you generally only have a certain season in which you can grow each type of fruit or vegetable. So many people have started growing more food themselves. There's ways that you can grow upwards instead of having a lot of land and growing outwards. It's become very popular. But now we're being warned in a new study that the carbon footprint of homegrown food is 5 times greater than those grown conventionally through big farms. So what does that mean? We're being told, essentially, that maybe we should just allow these company farms to grow our food and not grow anything on our own.
No, we must grow things on our own. That way they're not GMO. There's no pesticides, herbicides, fungicides that are very bad for us.
And then the GMOs, the way they've genetically modified some of these foods, or sometimes they coat the outside of them so they will keep longer, we don't know the long-term effects of these things. So why do we have to risk ourselves, our children, our children's children, without knowing what we could be subjecting ourselves to?
Because we're big test dummies. That's why. That's why I'm surprised when you guys brought up the fact that a simple French fry that's made for a McDonald's fast food store here I mean in the U.S. versus one in England has so many different byproducts in it here in America versus what's done overseas. I don't know if they're more into the protection of their citizenry or we're just not. I'm yet to figure that out. We have 2 things in fries over in Europe, 2 or 3. Oil, the potato, and salt. I think that's it. Here, I think we have heavy metals, light metals, copper, zinc, salt. No.
We have a lot of stuff that ends up getting added to our food. And if you look at way back in the day, they decided a lot of people weren't getting their vitamins, so they started putting enriched. They started calling the food enriched, and they were enriched with vitamins. Then they started doing it synthetically. So you're not getting real vitamins anymore. You're getting synthetic vitamins. They've also changed the way the food grows, its genetic compounds. It's quite, scientifically, it's really interesting that they're able to do these things, but also we don't know what we don't know. And if other countries are banning it, maybe they do know and we choose not to know.
They're banning it for a reason. You are correct.
So in sad news, a couple of things have come out. There's a former Trump official who was shot and killed during a carjacking in Washington, D.C. So official Mike Gill was sustained injuries after he was carjacked and ultimately died from those injuries. And this individual that was out there, Artel Cunningham, who was 28, apparently tried stealing another vehicle around an hour later and then approached others demanding their keys. But Cunningham was later shot and killed by law enforcement. And they talked about the crime in D.C., that it's gotten out of hand. But is this just another example of no bail policies being amazing?
I believe it is.
Another person's dead? Another shooting victim?
Absolutely. Something that was fully preventable was not prevented.
Carjackings in D.C. have actually risen in recent years, prompting frustration and concern from law-abiding residents. And if our listeners remember, Representative Henry Queller of Texas was carjacked at gunpoint in October. In November 2023, D.C. police recorded 250 homicides, the highest numbers the city had seen since 2003. 908 carjackings during that same period. 77% involved a firearm. It's already illegal. Double illegal, and people are still doing it.
And if you try to get a CCW back there, you can't, because they've made it so restrictive that you can't do it. You can't defend yourself. I don't know if DC has the same rules that New York has, that you got to go through 1,800 things to go through a safety course to then potentially go through another course that might allow you to go to another course to get your CCW to defend yourself. But if you do, you can't, because they have a weird law that you're supposed to tuck your tail between your legs and run the other direction if possible, and only fight back as a last resort.
And even if it's a last resort, as in New York, they will still go after you. They will still arrest you. So there is, and just to put it on, California passed a law to double the amount of hours that you have to have in order to get a CCW. So what used to be 8 is now 16 for first timers, and what used to be 4-hour renewal is now an 8-hour renewal. But they didn't open up the classes to make sure that anyone had access to training who are already firearms instructors and CCW instructors. So here locally, they've had to shut down temporarily the issuance of CCWs for first timers because you can't get to class, because California is not training the trainers, and they didn't even have classes scheduled or available despite knowing this was coming down.
I think that they should demand that all criminals go through the same courses.
Absolutely. If you've ever been arrested or thought about getting arrested, you should have to go through a CCW course, mandatory.
100%.
So I don't know if you heard about Ilhan Omar. She gave a political speech, and she gave it in her home country language, in Somali. And while she was giving this, she didn't have a translator. It wasn't being done in English, and it was done to other immigrants from Somalia. She basically says that she is there in Congress to act on behalf of the Somali people and for Somalia, and calls their president her president.
So does that mean she's trying to get funding for Somalia? So she's trying to get grants and monies allocated so she can pipeline it to Somalia?
It would appear so. I mean, it would appear she has more ties to Somalia than she has to being supporting America.
Well, you know what I say to that? Hasta
lasagna.
Go home.
Yeah, so the same country that she had to flee from, I know she was a child, so that her parents and grandparent fled from So she was in a refugee camp in Kenya. She gets slated to come to the United States. She ultimately got her citizenship through her father. It is my understanding he naturalized before she turned 18, so she was then, by virtue of the law, eligible for naturalization that way. But she basically goes over that the U.S. government will do what we want, nothing else. They must follow our orders. That is how we safeguard the interests of Somalia. And she tries to say that her words were taken out of context, but then other people have interpreted from Somali to English and said, no, she said what she said. There's no taking out of
It's
context.
probably a lot easier to interpret Somali in English than it is to interpret the Quran, which a lot of people that follow the Quran and speak Arabic say that when it goes into the English translation, it gets messed up.
It gets messed up.
Yes.
Well, she told a crowd of Somali Americans that they are Somalis first, Muslims second, and they need to come to the aid of other Somalis and other Muslims. And she doesn't mention the word America, not here in America. And so the same country that gave you refuge, you're trying to figure out how you can abuse it to help your quote unquote home country. Go back there. Go help from the inside.
Yep. Go home if you hate it so much. I mean, I still think this is a great country. And like you said so eloquently a little while ago, it is what it is here. We've got problems, but they're fixable. If somebody comes here as a child and grows up and becomes a congresswoman in a very powerful position, you better love America or you need to resign your commission, so to speak, and you need to get on a plane, fly home, don't come back.
Another point that is very difficult, I think, for her to get out of her intent, she criticizes people living in Somaliland, which is its own country, is attempting to show the world that it's its own country. It borders Somalia. So she suggests that people in Somaliland are not real Somalis. And she briefly talked about the recent memorandum of understanding between Somaliland and Ethiopia, in which Ethiopia gained access to the sea in exchange for recognizing Somaliland as a sovereign state. She cares more about making sure other individuals Somaliland can't or don't exist to her, to other Somalis. But yet, I don't know, she's fighting for the right to have another country not be recognized. Oh, that sounds a lot like, I don't know, Israel and Palestine. But it's only because this is her home country. This is Somalia, her home country, that she cares more about than anything else.
So it's kind of interesting that a lot of these countries are thousands of years old, and a lot of their problems, 99% of them, predate the advent of America. Why can't they get their proverbial you-know-what together and fix it?
Absolutely. They should be able to get their stuff together and fix it.
Yes.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.